Sarah Martinez had always been different from other police officers in the department. While her colleagues spent their free time at sports bars or family gatherings, she volunteered at the local animal shelter and taught self-defense classes to women who had survived domestic violence. Her captain, Robert Williams, had noticed her dedication from the first day she joined the force 3 years ago. The morning started like any other Tuesday in downtown Phoenix. Sarah adjusted her bulletproof vest and checked her radio as she prepared for another day of patrol duty. The Arizona sun was already beating down mercilessly at 8 in the morning, promising another scorching day ahead. She had grown accustomed to the heat, but the heavy uniform made every shift feel like an endurance test. Captain Williams called her into his office just as she was about to head out for patrol. His expression was serious, more serious than she had seen in months. Sarah knocked on the doorframe and waited for permission to enter. The office smelled of stale coffee and the stress that seemed to permanently hang in the air around police stations. "Martinez, we need to talk," Captain Williams said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Sarah sat down, her mind racing through recent cases, wondering if she had made some mistake or if there was a new assignment coming her way. The captain was known for his directness, but today he seemed to be choosing his words carefully. "There's been a complaint filed against you," he began, and Sarah's heart sank. In 3 years of service, she had never had a formal complaint. She prided herself on treating everyone with respect and following protocol to the letter. Her arrest record was clean, her reports were thorough, and she had even received commendations for her community outreach work. "Sir, what kind of complaint?" Sarah asked, trying to keep her voice steady. She thought back through recent interactions with the public, searching for anything that might have been misinterpreted or blown out of proportion. There was the domestic violence call last week, but the victim had thanked her. The traffic stop on Friday had gone smoothly, and the driver had even apologized for speeding. Captain Williams pulled out a file and opened it slowly. "A citizen claims you have inappropriate body modifications that are visible while in uniform. They say it's unprofessional and reflects poorly on the department." Sarah's mind immediately went to the small tattoo on her wrist, a simple design that was barely visible even when she wore short sleeves. She had gotten department approval for it years ago. "Captain, you know about my wrist tattoo. It was approved and documented when I was hired," Sarah said, confusion evident in her voice. The tattoo was a small semicolon, a symbol that meant something deeply personal to her, but it was hardly controversial or inappropriate. "This isn't about your wrist, Martinez," Captain Williams replied, his voice taking on a more formal tone. "The complaint suggests there are other markings that become visible when you remove parts of your uniform. Internal Affairs wants to conduct an investigation to verify the complaint and ensure department standards are being maintained." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine, despite the desert heat outside. She knew exactly what this was about, and her stomach twisted with a mixture of anger and fear. There was only one tattoo that could be causing this issue, and it was in a location that should never be visible while she was in uniform. Someone had seen something they shouldn't have seen, or someone was making assumptions based on rumors. "Sir, I need to know who filed this complaint and what exactly they're claiming to have seen," Sarah said, her voice becoming firmer. She had worked too hard to get where she was to let false accusations derail her career. The police academy had been grueling, and earning the respect of her fellow officers had taken time and persistence. Captain Williams closed the file and leaned back in his chair. "That information is confidential during the investigation, but I will say this much. The complaint is detailed enough that Internal Affairs considers it credible. They're requiring a full inspection to put the matter to rest." He paused, studying Sarah's face for any reaction. "I'm going to need you to report to the medical examiner's office tomorrow morning at 9. Dr. Patricia Chen will conduct the examination." The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning and distant radio chatter from the main floor. Sarah stared at the captain, processing what he had just told her. She would have to undergo a physical examination to prove or disprove allegations about her body. The violation of privacy felt overwhelming, but she also knew that refusing would likely end her career immediately. "Captain, this feels like harassment," Sarah said quietly. "I've never done anything to warrant this level of scrutiny. My performance reviews are excellent, my community relationships are strong, and I've never had so much as a warning for any policy violation. Martinez, I know this is difficult, but we have to follow protocol," Captain Williams replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable with the situation either. "If the allegations are unfounded, this will clear your name completely. If there are policy violations, we'll deal with them appropriately." Sarah stood up, her legs feeling unsteady beneath her. "Will I be suspended pending this investigation?" The question came out more quietly than she intended. Suspension would mean no pay, and she couldn't afford to miss work. Her mother's medical bills were already stretching her budget thin, and losing income now could be devastating. "You'll remain on desk duty until this is resolved," Captain Williams said. "Turn in your service weapon and patrol equipment to Sergeant Rodriguez before you leave today. You'll be working with records until further notice." The walk back to her desk felt like the longest journey of her life. Fellow officers looked up as she passed, and she wondered if they had already heard about the investigation. Police stations were notorious for gossip, and news traveled fast through the ranks. Sarah gathered her personal items from her patrol bag, trying to maintain her composure. Sergeant Rodriguez was waiting by her desk when she returned. He was a veteran officer with 22 years on the force, and Sarah had always respected his fairness and judgment. His expression was sympathetic as he took her weapon and radio equipment, but he didn't ask any questions. The silence was somehow worse than if he had demanded an explanation. That evening, Sarah sat in her small apartment, staring at the wall and trying to figure out how her life had suddenly spiraled out of control. The tattoo at the center of this controversy wasn't something she had gotten on a whim or as a rebellious statement. It had deep personal meaning, connected to a part of her life that she had never shared with anyone at work. She pulled out her phone and called her older brother, Miguel, who lived in California. He was the only person who knew the full story behind the tattoo, and she needed someone to talk to who would understand what she was going through. The phone rang several times before he answered, his voice cheerful until he heard the strain in her tone. "Sarah, what's wrong? You sound terrible," Miguel said, immediately switching to concerned older brother mode. Sarah explained the situation, trying to keep her voice steady as she described the complaint and the upcoming examination. Miguel listened without interrupting, just as he had when they were children, and she would tell him about playground bullies or failed tests. "This is discrimination, Sarah," Miguel said firmly once she had finished explaining. "Someone is targeting you, and you need to fight back." "Have you thought about getting a lawyer?" Sarah had considered it, but lawyers were expensive, and she wasn't even sure what rights she had in this situation. "I don't know if I can afford legal help right now," Sarah admitted. "And if I lawyer up immediately, it might make me look guilty of something. Maybe it's better to just go through with the examination and prove there's nothing inappropriate." Miguel was quiet for a moment, and Sarah could hear his wife and children in the background, living their normal evening routine. "Whatever you decide, I support you," he finally said. "But remember that tattoo isn't something to be ashamed of. What you survived and how you chose to honor it, that's your strength, not your weakness." After hanging up, Sarah made herself a simple dinner and tried to watch television, but she couldn't concentrate on anything. Her mind kept returning to the events that had led to getting the tattoo in the first place, memories she had worked hard to process and move beyond. Tomorrow's examination would force her to reveal something deeply personal to strangers who would judge whether it met department standards. She went to bed early but lay awake for hours, listening to the sounds of the city outside her window. Police sirens wailed in the distance, and she wondered if her colleagues were handling calls she should have been responding to. The desk assignment felt like punishment before any wrongdoing had been proven, and the unfairness of it all made sleep impossible. Morning came too quickly, bringing with it the reality of what lay ahead. Sarah dressed carefully in civilian clothes, choosing a conservative outfit that she hoped would project professionalism and dignity. She had no idea what to expect from the medical examination, but she wanted to face it with as much composure as possible. The drive to the medical examiner's office took her through parts of the city where she had patrolled countless times. She knew the streets, the businesses, the people who lived and worked in these neighborhoods. Some of them had thanked her for her service. Others had viewed her with suspicion simply because of her uniform. Now she was driving the same route as a civilian under investigation, and everything looked different. Dr. Patricia Chen was waiting in her office when Sarah arrived at exactly 9 o'clock. The medical examiner was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a professional demeanor that immediately put Sarah somewhat at ease. Her office was clean and well organized, with medical certificates on the walls and family photos on her desk. "Officer Martinez, please have a seat," Dr. Chen said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk. "I want you to know that I understand this is an unusual and potentially uncomfortable situation. I've reviewed the complaint, and I want to explain exactly what we need to do and why." Sarah appreciated the doctor's straightforward approach. Too often in her experience, people danced around difficult topics instead of addressing them directly. "Thank you, Dr. Chen. I have to admit I'm not sure what to expect from this process." Dr. Chen opened a file on her desk and pulled out several documents. "The complaint alleges that you have a tattoo in a location that could be visible when removing your bulletproof vest or other uniform components during the course of your duties. Department policy requires that all tattoos be documented and approved, with restrictions on size, content, and placement." "I understand the policy," Sarah replied. "When I was hired, I disclosed my wrist tattoo and received written approval. I wasn't aware that any other markings were visible during my duties." This was technically true. Sarah had been extremely careful about her uniform and had never intentionally allowed the other tattoo to be seen. "The examination I need to conduct will verify the presence, location, size, and content of any body modifications that could potentially be visible while you're in uniform," Dr. Chen explained. "This includes situations where you might need to remove your vest for medical attention, equipment adjustments, or other legitimate reasons during your shift." Sarah's mouth went dry as she realized the scope of what was being asked. The tattoo in question covered a significant portion of her back, from her shoulder blade down to her lower ribs. It had taken multiple sessions to complete and was far more elaborate than the simple semicolon on her wrist. "Dr. Chen, before we begin, I need to explain something about the tattoo you're going to see," Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's not what you might expect, and it has very personal meaning for me." The doctor's expression softened slightly. "Officer Martinez, I've been doing this work for over 20 years. I've seen every kind of body modification imaginable, and I don't make judgments about personal choices. My job is simply to document what I observe and report whether it complies with department policy." Sarah nodded, trying to gather her courage. She had known this moment might come someday, but she had hoped to have more control over when and how her story was revealed. "The tattoo commemorates my sister, Elena. She was murdered when I was 19 years old." Dr. Chen set down her pen and gave Sarah her full attention. "I'm very sorry for your loss. That must have been incredibly difficult for you and your family. Elena was 2 years younger than me, and we were best friends," Sarah continued, the words coming easier now that she had started. She was walking home from work one evening when someone grabbed her off the street. Her body was found 3 days later. Sarah paused, the familiar weight of grief settling in her chest. The doctor waited patiently, understanding that this explanation was important for Sarah to give before the examination. The investigation went nowhere. No arrests were ever made, and the case went cold within 6 months. That's actually part of why I became a police officer. I wanted to help other families get the justice that mine never received. That's a noble motivation, Dr. Chen said gently. And the tattoo relates to your sister's memory? Sarah nodded. It's a portrait of Elena, along with her favorite quote and the dates of her birth and death. She always said that people who hurt others only win if they make you stop believing in goodness. The tattoo reminds me every day why I do this job. Dr. Chen made some notes in her file. That sounds like a beautiful memorial. Are you ready to proceed with the examination? Sarah took a deep breath and nodded. The doctor led her to an adjoining examination room where she could change into a medical gown. When Sarah removed her shirt, the full scope of the tattoo became visible. Elena's face looked out from Sarah's shoulder blade, rendered in stunning detail by a master artist who had donated his work when he learned the story. Below the portrait, Elena's favorite quote was written in elegant script. "In a world where you can be anything, be kind." The dates bracketing her short life served as a constant reminder of how precious and fragile time really was. Dr. Chen examined the tattoo carefully, taking photographs and measurements as required by the investigation protocol. Her touch was gentle and professional, but Sarah still felt exposed and vulnerable. This tattoo was meant to be private, a personal conversation between sisters that no one else was supposed to witness. The workmanship is exceptional, Dr. Chen commented as she worked. This obviously means a great deal to you. Sarah nodded, unable to trust her voice at that moment. The clinical nature of the examination felt wrong when applied to something so deeply personal and meaningful. After completing the documentation, Dr. Chen allowed Sarah to get dressed while she prepared her initial findings. Based on my examination, I can confirm that this tattoo would not be visible during normal patrol duties. However, it would become apparent if you needed to remove your bulletproof vest for any reason. Is that a violation of department policy? Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. The policy was clear about tattoos being concealed during all official duties, with limited exceptions for small approved markings. Technically, yes, Dr. Chen replied. The size and placement mean it falls outside the current guidelines. However, my report will include the context you've provided about its meaning and purpose. The final decision about any disciplinary action will be made by Internal Affairs and your command staff. Sarah felt a sinking sensation in her stomach. Despite the personal significance of the tattoo, she had violated department policy by not disclosing it during the hiring process. At the time, she had convinced herself that it would never be visible, but that reasoning now seemed naive and inadequate. "What happens next?" Sarah asked as they returned to Dr. Chen's office. The doctor was completing her paperwork, and Sarah could see that the report was quite detailed, including multiple photographs and precise measurements of the tattoo's dimensions. "I'll submit this report to Internal Affairs by the end of today," Dr. Chen explained. "They'll review the findings along with the original complaint and determine what action, if any, is appropriate. You should expect to hear something within a week." Sarah thanked Dr. Chen for her professionalism and kindness throughout the examination. As she walked back to her car, she felt emotionally drained, but also strangely relieved. The secret was out now, and there was no taking it back. Whatever consequences followed would at least be based on the truth rather than speculation and rumors. The drive back to the police station was different from the morning trip. Sarah found herself thinking about Elena and the promise she had made at her sister's funeral to live a life that would make her proud. Becoming a police officer had felt like honoring that promise, but now she wondered if her career might be over before she had accomplished any of the goals that had driven her to this profession. Back at the station, Sarah reported to the records department where she would be working until the investigation concluded. The work was mundane compared to patrol duties, filing reports, updating databases, and answering phones, but it gave her time to think about her situation and plan her next steps. Detective Amanda Torres, a 15-year veteran who had mentored Sarah during her first year on the force, stopped by the records department during her lunch break. Amanda was one of the few people at the station who knew about Sarah's sister, though not about the tattoo. "How are you holding up?" Amanda asked quietly, settling into the chair next to Sarah's temporary desk. The records department was mostly empty during lunch, giving them privacy to talk. "I'm not sure yet," Sarah admitted. "The examination is done, and now I just have to wait for internal affairs to make their decision. I feel like my entire career is hanging in the balance over something that should be personal." Amanda nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I've been thinking about this situation since I heard about the investigation. Something doesn't sit right with me about the whole thing. Have you considered that someone might be targeting you specifically?" The thought had occurred to Sarah, but she hadn't wanted to seem paranoid or defensive. "I can't prove it, but yes, I've wondered about that. The complaint was apparently very detailed about something that should never have been visible during my duties." "That's exactly what bothers me," Amanda said. "Either someone saw you in a compromising situation, which would be concerning for other reasons, or someone is making assumptions based on rumors or partial information. Neither scenario reflects well on whoever filed the complaint." Sarah appreciated Amanda's support, but she also knew that speculation wouldn't help her case. "Even if someone is targeting me, I still violated policy by not disclosing the tattoo. That's on me, regardless of how the complaint came about." "Maybe," Amanda replied, "but intent matters. You didn't get that tattoo to make a statement or rebel against authority. You got it to honor your sister's memory. That context should carry some weight in how this is handled." After Amanda left, Sarah spent the afternoon thinking about their conversation. She realized that she had been so focused on the policy violation that she hadn't considered the broader implications of how this investigation had come about. Someone had gone to significant effort to file a detailed complaint about something they shouldn't have had the opportunity to observe. That evening, Sarah called her brother Miguel again to update him on the examination and to discuss her concerns about the complaint itself. Miguel listened carefully and then asked the questions that Sarah had been avoiding. "Who would want to hurt your career?" he asked. "Have you had conflicts with anyone recently? Any arrests that went badly or complaints from citizens that might have escalated?" Sarah thought back through recent months, searching for anything that might have created an enemy. Police work naturally involved conflicts, but she had always tried to de-escalate situations and treat people with respect. There had been a few difficult arrests, but nothing that seemed personal or vindictive. "There is one thing," Sarah said slowly, remembering an incident from several weeks earlier. "I arrested someone for domestic violence, and they made some threats about getting back at me. But that was weeks ago, and I didn't think much of it at the time." Miguel was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, you need to document that threat and any other incidents you can remember. If someone is deliberately trying to sabotage your career, that changes everything about how you should handle this situation." After hanging up with Miguel, Sarah spent the rest of the evening going through her arrest reports and incident files, looking for anything that might explain how someone had obtained information about her tattoo. The process was tedious, but it also helped her feel like she was taking some control back over her situation. She made a list of every difficult arrest, contentious traffic stop, and negative interaction she could remember from the past 6 months. Some of them were probably innocent, but others raised questions about how information might have been gathered or rumors might have been started. As she prepared for bed, Sarah realized that tomorrow would bring new challenges regardless of what internal affairs ultimately decided about her case. She would need to be prepared for anything from a simple reprimand to termination, and she would need to decide whether to fight the decision or accept whatever consequences came her way. 3 days later, Sarah received a call from Captain Williams asking her to come to his office immediately. Internal Affairs had completed their review of Dr. Chen's report, and they were ready to discuss their findings. Sarah's hands shook slightly as she walked through the station, noting how conversations seemed to stop when she passed by. Lieutenant Rebecca Hayes from Internal Affairs was waiting in Captain Williams' office when Sarah arrived. Lieutenant Hayes was known throughout the department for her thoroughness and fairness, but also for her strict interpretation of policy and regulations. Her presence suggested that this meeting would be formal and potentially career-defining. "Officer Martinez, please sit down," Lieutenant Hayes began once everyone was settled. "We've completed our review of the medical examination report and the original complaint. I want to discuss our findings with you before we make any final decisions about disciplinary action." Sarah sat up straight, trying to project confidence despite the anxiety churning in her stomach. "Yes, ma'am, I understand." Lieutenant Hayes opened a thick file and pulled out several documents. "First, let me address the policy violation. The tattoo documented by Dr. Chen does exceed the size and placement guidelines outlined in department policy. You should have disclosed this during your hiring process, and failure to do so constitutes a violation of the honesty and integrity standards we expect from our officers." The words hit Sarah like a physical blow, even though she had been expecting them. "I understand, Lieutenant. At the time, I believed the tattoo would never be visible during my duties, but I realize now that I should have disclosed it regardless. However," Lieutenant Hayes continued, and Sarah felt a flicker of hope at the word, "we've also investigated the circumstances surrounding the original complaint, and we've discovered some concerning information about how this matter came to our attention." Captain Williams leaned forward, his expression serious. "Sarah, the complaint was filed by Dennis Morrison, the man you arrested for domestic violence 6 weeks ago. During our investigation, we learned that he had been asking questions about you at several locations around the city, apparently trying to gather information that could be used against you." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Dennis Morrison had been violent and aggressive during his arrest, and he had made vague threats about making her pay for humiliating him. At the time, Sarah had dismissed the threats as the angry ramblings of someone who didn't want to face consequences for his actions. "How did he find out about the tattoo?" Sarah asked, though part of her was afraid to hear the answer. The thought that someone had been deliberately gathering information about her personal life felt like a violation beyond the policy issues. Lieutenant Hayes consulted her notes. "Morrison's ex-girlfriend, the victim in the domestic violence case, works at the tattoo parlor where you had your memorial piece done. She didn't betray any confidentiality, but Morrison apparently pressured her for information about you after his arrest. She eventually admitted that she had seen photographs of the work when it was completed." The pieces of the puzzle began falling into place in Sarah's mind. Morrison had used his connection to the victim to gather ammunition against the officer who had arrested him. The complaint wasn't about maintaining department standards. It was about revenge and intimidation. "This doesn't excuse the policy violation," Captain Williams said carefully, "but it does change how we view the circumstances surrounding the complaint. Morrison filed a false report when he claimed to have personally observed the tattoo during your official duties. He never saw it. He was just trying to cause problems for you." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anger. Relief that the truth had come out, but anger that someone had gone to such lengths to try to destroy her career out of spite. "What happens to Morrison for filing a false complaint?" "He's facing charges for making false statements to police and harassment," Lieutenant Hayes replied. "The district attorney is reviewing the case, and there will likely be additional charges related to his attempts to intimidate a police officer." Now we need to decide what to do about your situation, Captain Williams said. You did violate policy by not disclosing the tattoo, but the circumstances surrounding how this came to light are exceptional. We also need to consider the meaning and significance of the tattoo itself. Lieutenant Hayes nodded and pulled out another document. I've read Dr. Chen's report, including your explanation of why you got the tattoo. I've also spoken with Detective Torres about your performance and character. Everyone speaks very highly of your dedication to the job and your integrity. Sarah waited, not sure whether to feel hopeful or prepare for the worst. Department discipline could range from a written reprimand to termination, and she had no way of knowing which direction this would go. Here's what we've decided, Lieutenant Hayes announced. You'll receive a written reprimand for failing to disclose the tattoo during the hiring process. This will remain in your personnel file for 2 years and then be removed if there are no other policy violations during that time. Sarah blinked, hardly believing what she was hearing. A written reprimand was the lightest possible disciplinary action, essentially a formal warning with minimal long-term consequences. Additionally, Captain Williams added, you'll need to get official approval to keep the tattoo, which will require documentation of its meaning and significance. Given the circumstances, I'm confident that approval will be granted, but we need to follow proper procedures going forward. You're also going to be transferred to the Community Relations Division, Lieutenant Hayes said. Detective Torres specifically requested you for her team, and given your background and motivation for joining the force, we think you'll be an asset to their work with victims' families and community outreach. Sarah felt tears welling up in her eyes, but these were tears of relief and gratitude rather than fear and anger. The transfer to community relations was actually an opportunity for advancement, not a punishment. Working with victims' families would allow her to honor Elena's memory in a more direct way than regular patrol duties. Thank you, Sarah managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. I know I made a mistake by not disclosing the tattoo initially, and I appreciate the department's consideration of the circumstances. Don't thank us yet, Captain Williams said with a slight smile. Detective Torres is a demanding supervisor, and community relations deals with some of the most difficult cases in the department. You'll be working with families who have lost loved ones to violence, just like you did. It won't be easy. After the meeting, Sarah walked back through the station with a completely different feeling than she had experienced over the past week. Officers who had been avoiding eye contact now nodded or offered words of support. Word had apparently spread about Morrison's false complaint, and the tide of opinion had turned in Sarah's favor. Detective Torres was waiting at Sarah's temporary desk in records with a broad smile and a stack of case files. Welcome to Community Relations, she said warmly. I hope you're ready to hit the ground running because we have about 15 families who could use your help right now. Sarah looked at the files, each one representing a family whose life had been torn apart by violence or tragedy. This was the work she had dreamed of doing when she first became a police officer, helping people find justice and closure during the worst moments of their lives. There's something else you should know, Detective Torres said as they walked toward the Community Relations office. The story about what happened to you has reached some of the families we work with. They've specifically asked to work with the officer who honors her sister's memory with a tattoo. They see you as someone who understands their pain. That afternoon, Sarah met with the Rodriguez family, whose teenage daughter had been murdered in a drive-by shooting 3 months earlier. Mrs. Rodriguez had requested Sarah specifically after hearing about the investigation and its outcome. When Sarah explained about Elena and the tattoo that commemorated her life, Mrs. Rodriguez broke down in tears. Finally, Mrs. Rodriguez said through her sobs, someone who understands. All the other officers are nice, but they don't know what it feels like to lose a piece of your heart forever. Sarah spent 2 hours with the Rodriguez family, sharing strategies for dealing with grief and explaining how the investigation into their daughter's murder was progressing. For the first time since Elena's death, Sarah felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Over the following weeks, Sarah threw herself into her new role with passion and dedication. She worked with families of murder victims, helped coordinate victim services, and developed new programs for supporting people who had lost loved ones to violence. The memorial tattoo that had nearly ended her career became a source of connection and trust with the people she served. Word spread through the community about the police officer who understood loss and who wore her heart on her skin. Families began requesting Sarah specifically for their cases, and her caseload grew to include some of the most challenging and high-profile investigations in the city. 6 months after the investigation, Sarah received a letter from Elena's high school. They had heard about her work and wanted to establish a scholarship fund in Elena's memory for students pursuing careers in criminal justice or victim advocacy. Sarah was asked to speak at the dedication ceremony, where she would have the opportunity to share Elena's story and its impact on her own life. Standing at the podium in the high school auditorium, Sarah looked out at an audience filled with students, families, and community members. For a moment, she thought about how different her life might have been if Dennis Morrison's complaint had succeeded in ending her career. My sister Elena believed that people who hurt others only win if they make you stop believing in goodness. Sarah began, her voice steady and clear. She was murdered when she was just 17 years old. But her belief in kindness and justice lives on through the work that all of us do to make our community safer. Sarah told the audience about the tattoo investigation and how it had led her to the work that truly honored Elena's memory. She talked about the importance of turning pain into purpose and using personal tragedy to help others heal from their own losses. The tattoo that almost cost me my career has become my greatest strength as a police officer, Sarah concluded. It reminds me every day that behind every case file is a real person whose life mattered to someone. That's the kind of police officer my sister would have wanted me to be. After the ceremony, Sarah was approached by a young woman who introduced herself as Maria Santos. Maria was a college student studying criminal justice, and she had been following Sarah's story through news reports and social media. "I want to be a police officer like you," Maria said earnestly. "Someone who remembers that this job is about people, not just procedures. Would you consider mentoring me?" Sarah smiled, thinking about how Elena would have loved to see young people inspired to pursue justice and help others. "I'd be honored to help you," she replied. "But remember, it's not going to be easy. This job will challenge everything you think you know about yourself and the world." As Sarah drove home that evening, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. The investigation that had threatened to destroy her career had ultimately led her to work that felt more meaningful than anything she had ever done. The tattoo that was meant to be a private memorial had become a public symbol of hope for families dealing with unimaginable loss. Elena's face looked out from Sarah's shoulder blade as it did every day, a constant reminder of why she had chosen this path and what she was fighting for. The quote beneath the portrait seemed more relevant than ever. "In a world where you can be anything, be kind." Sarah had learned that kindness didn't mean weakness, and that honoring the past didn't require hiding from the present. Her sister's memory lived on, not just in ink and artwork, but in every family she helped, every case she solved, and every young person she inspired to believe in justice. The uniform that had once threatened to hide her truth had become a symbol of her commitment to serving others with honesty, compassion, and understanding. And the tattoo that had nearly ended her career had become the foundation for a new chapter of service that Elena would have been proud to see.